For this very exciting Stimson Center event with Russell Rumbaugh, who currently serves as Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Financial Management and Comptroller. It's really, for me personally, particularly gratifying to welcome Russell back to Stimson. For those who don't know, Russell is an alumnus of the Stimson Center. I spent many years sitting in the office right next to him. I'm hoping that some of his smart sort of through osmosis went through the wall, and I've learned already so much from him, and I hope that you all learn quite a bit from him today. We're really incredibly proud to see Russell succeed, and I like to believe that some of that success comes from the experiences he had here at Stimson, and that we positioned him well for the wonderful career he has had. So speaking with Russell today is Christopher Preble, who directs our Reimagining U.S. Grand Strategy program. This event is really focused on an overlooked part of strategy making, the means. So managing and growing the U.S. Navy is an expensive job, and monitoring the finance of such a large institution is a gargantuan task. Amidst the ongoing effort to expand the Navy, there have been stories of systems that don't live up to expectations, contractors significantly overcharging for their services, and these are major challenges that Russell is tasked with addressing. And I look forward to hearing how he manages these challenges and the ways in which he balances all of the competing interests that I know he faces on a daily basis. So we're very excited to have many of you in the room, but we also want to thank those of you who are joining us online for this event. Before we get started, I want to urge you to submit any questions that you have by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can throughout this event. And with that, welcome to Stimson. Welcome back to Stimson, Russell. And over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you all for joining us today. And right at the outset, I really want to give a special shout out to my colleague, Evan Cooper, and to Katie and Adrian and Joaquin of our comms team for helping with this event. So thank you all very much. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Christopher Preble. I am a senior fellow here at Stimson, and I'm the director of the Reimagining U.S. Grand Strategy program. My colleagues and I are committed to strengthening U.S. foreign policy by exploring innovative approaches to international engagement. We believe that the voices influencing policy decisions are often too narrow and that unconventional thinking is urgently required. So through original research, media appearances, and events like this one, we are transforming the national security debate by challenging conventional wisdom and questioning assumptions. In the process, we aim to help policymakers manage risks, make informed decisions, and allocate resources wisely. The managing resources wisely seems particularly apt today. Russell, welcome back to Stimson. As Rachel said, I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you.
No, thank you, although now I already have to stop and, again, my thanks to the Stimson team and point out that Rachel's points are all ridiculous. I am the one who learned so much by sitting next to her. I learned from Chris. I learned from Brian Finley, the president and CEO of Stimson. I owe a huge amount to what Stimson gave me the opportunity to do and love being back. The only downside to this is my secretary, Secretary Carlos Del Toro, can't help but tease me mildly that he was at Stimson more recently and in a more senior role as a board member. So even as I boast about my Stimson affiliation, I don't even win in Navy Secretariat meetings.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, again, it's great to see you, Russell. Thank you. Let's start. Look, for the everyday citizen, let's imagine that the average folks sort of, tuning into this particular event don't know the answer to this question. So let's start with a basic question. What's a comptroller? Why is it needed? And what's a good sort of example, a parallel example in the private sector?
Hilariously, that is an incredibly substantive question off the bat, even though we're just at the Wikipedia level. If you want to be simple, the simple analogy is we're the chief financial officer, except for the military departments, we are explicitly excluded of that title. There is only one chief financial officer in DOD, Mike McCord, the Undersecretary of Defense for Comptroller. And more importantly, Comptroller is a weird government word, right? Because it talks about the controls, the internal controls. That matters on two sides. On one side, the budget. It's not that I'm financing the Navy. I'm going to Congress to explain, hey, this is what's going on. Our budget brief where the budget officer and I, or the undersecretary, roll out the dawn budget, is the biggest moment, single moment in the how we get resources for the Navy. And then the second side, the side that's ever more important, is the actual control science. And today, that comes in trying to become auditable. So I love the term comptroller. I have pestered my flag officers a lot when I meet them. I walk up to the hallway and say, hey, I'm Russell, you're comptroller. And of course, that kind of short circuits them because like that failed to tell them like, no, assistants. It throws them for a loop, but I think it's great and love the term. But unfortunately, it does bring in a huge amount of substance, the substance I think you want to explore a little bit, as Rachel said.
That's right. Great. Thanks, Russell. Let's start with what were some of the top priorities you had in the job when you came into office? I mean, and how well do you think you're making progress on these goals? What would you point to right now as some of your early successes, your proudest accomplishments so far?
I'm very fortunate. Not only was I raised by Stimson, but I walked into a very high-performing organization with a lot of the pieces right in place. Already talked about Mike McCord. He has a DoD FM strategy, financial management strategy. The Department of the Navy has a financial management strategy with 5 strategic goals. So there was a lot of work done already on what we are trying to achieve. I was very careful to make sure that I was not ruling out all of that great that works in place. Instead, I talk about what are my 3 personal leadership priorities. You see, I've become a good bureaucrat again already, and so like each word has to do work. So it's just my personal priorities because we have an FM strategy, and that's the right answer. I just told you about it. For me, though, the 3 are make hard choices without haste, grow the dawn in a healthy way, and keep the best FM team the best, including in DEI. Those have helped me a lot stay focused on all of the things going on. There's about 10,000 FMers in the entire Department of the Navy. I've got about 330 people who report to me, $250 billion up at Congress right now in the 24 budget. There's a lot of things going on, so having those priorities helps a lot, even as it's a lot of things. You really want me to tell you what I think I've done?
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to resist. I'm not willing to say the accomplishment because it turns out it is a broad swath and it all better be moving forward. I am honored to be in service, but I recognize that I'm the one who owes it to the department, to the country, to the American taxpayer to move things along. We do have really big wins. We have developed what's called the Commander's Enterprise Resource Management Council, CERMIC, to give you yet another acronym. And with that, what we're trying to do is get rid of expired and canceled funds. Congress only gives us our money for a certain period of time. If we don't spend them, it goes back to the Treasury. Well, good that the U.S. government keeps it. Bad that we didn't spend it in the way we were told to spend it. Using CERMIC, which is a quarterly meeting where we take advantage of the Jupyter tool, which is the Department of the Navy's Advana version, so using very modern data analytics, we go through and scrub in a way you can't do from the basic databases to look at where money has been obligated, hasn't been obligated, supposedly was obligated but never went out the door. And by doing that, we have cut expired funds in half what actually gets channeled back. We hope we're continuing to chip at that, so it's always a journey, but a great accomplishment in trying to make sure we spend that money wisely and it goes where it's supposed to be. On the audit, we are having successes. We are wrestling. This is the worst time to talk about the audit because we have closed the fiscal year, so everything's done, but nobody has written up the reports yet, so I can't tell you where we stand, and all I can do is knock on wood and hope that we're going to have a big unveil in the coming months, but we'll see because we're at the mercy of the independent public auditors and whether they believe we actually live up to that. And then it's easy on grow the Department of the Navy in a healthy way. The President's budget had a 4.9% increase for the Department of the Navy after an 11% increase last year. So we are growing. I'd appreciate it if Congress would hurry up and appropriate their bills so I could actually get that increase and spend it since we're living in the new fiscal year without final appropriations. But just a series of things across those priorities of mine that I do think we're already making great progress. Of course, it's not me who does it, it's my team who are really exceptional and why I'm willing to call them the best FM team.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you very much, Russell. So
as you know, I served in the Navy many years ago, a long time ago.
I don't like that because that just drags me along with you.
Well, it's
Like,
true.
we could all
It's
just
true.
pretend we're young.
Yeah, exactly. I can't pretend that anymore. But, you know, I think that the Navy is a sort of uniquely, unique in the services, and it holds people accountable. Accountability is really important. And again, I'm sure the other services feel the same way. But I mean, as a surface warfare officer, you learn, you know, that from the you know, the captain of the ship down to the, you know, the most junior fireman or seaman on a ship, if you fail to do your job, you are going to be held accountable. There's going to be accountability. Explain to me how the Comptroller's office works within the Navy in this tradition, in terms of holding people accountable when it comes to money.
I love the question, and I absolutely believe we in the Comptroller shop, again, back to that internal controls, accountability is inherent in what we do. We have a long way to go. We are starting to use modern data analyst systems, but I am still dependent on my budget team's intuition of knowing where the squishy spots are, and then they go to the spreadsheets to try to find out if their intuition is correct and see if we can get at it. I love that. That makes them some of the best. But it's a little bit crazy that I'm reliant on human intuition at this point. The big thing I've learned is accountable is not actually the right word. DoD is absolutely an accountable organization. We don't lose things that go boom. Yet, somehow we're an accountable organization and we're not even close to auditable. What's the disconnect? And the difference in that is how fast you can do it, how often you can repeat it. We can always find anything if you give us enough time. Whether we can find it in the 20 minutes you give us is a whole nother question, and that's the change from accountable to auditable. Doesn't mean there's not a lot of people in the Department of Navy who are doing a ton of work to make sure they live up to the challenge that American people have given us. Also points out how far we have to go. We are currently moving our ordinance, the things that go boom, to try to get them into an auditable system. Wildly, the first thing I run into is we have a bunch of government-furnished property. My prime contractors hold stuff the government has already bought, and they're going to put it on. That's all over the place, right? Sensors we bought, a combat system we bought that's going to go on a ship. It includes ordnance that's being held at various prime contractors. And when my audit team shows up and goes, hey, where are these solid rocket motors that you own? The prime contractors say, oh, that's not in our contract. We don't have to tell you that. How can you possibly keep a straight face and say that? How can you not believe that should be an automatic, yes, it's right here, let me show you, please walk this way, and instantaneously get an answer? Two primes gave me my audit team that answer within the last 2 weeks. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Again, not that there's not accountability, but how do you actually get to full auditability where that is something we can reassure the American taxpayer with? I'm very fortunate. I work for this Deputy Secretary of Defense who has put a lot of her own personal leadership into auditability. I'm even more fortunate. The Marines are the farthest one along, not least of which because the commandants themselves decided they were committed to being auditable. When you have that senior leadership, it flows right down that chain as you described.
Right.
The most junior person, even better on the Marine side, the leadership now sees the value they get out of the audit. This is not just a paperwork drill. This is not more checking in boxes. In fact, we can see if you get to auditability, you take away the pieces of paper and everything goes faster. And now I'm on operationally relevant timelines. Of course, I just told a story about how I haven't gotten everybody on that yet. And that's the most frustrating thing is you grab, despite this leadership pressure, when you have people who still don't think. The best thing that's happening right now is up till now, audit has primarily been a financial management role. The comptroller's job, the budget geek's job, the green eye shade geeks. We are now recognizing that that is not just an FM. It's the supply system, who is already very far along and working very well with us. But it's also my contracting community, my acquisition community, and most importantly, my prime contractors who have to be part of it, have to be partners and provide that.
Right, right. Excellent. Thanks, Russell. Switching gears a little bit, although it is still related. And a reminder, everyone here in the audience, please keep in mind, get ready your questions. For those of you watching online, please submit your questions. We'll leave plenty of time at the end to hear from the rest of you. So thanks again for joining. Talk to me a little bit about how you as the Navy's comptroller and other military service comptrollers fit into the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution process. How and as you know, strategy is about setting priorities, right? This is absolutely critical. How does the Navy go about prioritizing what to invest in? Which programs should continue? Which one should be de-emphasized or even terminated? And what role have you been able to play in shaping the Navy's overall goals?
Well, my job's not to shape the goals. I'm the budgeteer. I'm the one who's supposed to make it reality. Luckily, I am honored to serve and feel very fortunate to serve at this time. My Secretary Del Toro, just in the last 2 weeks has unveiled what he calls maritime statecraft. So the broadest one. The best part about, one of the key parts about maritime statecraft is he doubled down on what he had already called his enduring priorities. Strengthen maritime dominance, maintain maritime dominance, build a culture of warfighting excellence, and enhance strategic partnerships. So those are very clear marching orders. I have one service chief, the commandant, who has been very clear, even in his first month here, about where he's trying to go. And then I have a nominated service chief who clearly has a vision for the Navy. It's based a lot on continuity, but you can already feel her leadership taking place. So that makes it very clear what the goals are. And then we get into that question, the question you teed up at the beginning, of how do you get there, the means. And that does empower my team, and I do think of my team as very broad. The service programmers, the 3 stars who are responsible for programming the out years, I then own the budget year, the year of execution, but I think of us as a team. I think we're all staff trying to help those senior leaders make those trades in the nitty-gritty that get us to those strategic goals. I feel very fortunate to be a part of the team right now and think we are clicking along at a very high level.
Oh, great, thank you very much. So the Navy leadership is obviously committed to being at the forefront of evolving technology, but we all acknowledge there's some tension here. There is some, there's some, again, from a perspective of prioritization. Do you see any hesitancy within the service in terms of forging new paths and building new partnerships? You know, we hear a lot, for example, about legacy systems and legacy relationships. In what ways do those constrain the Navy's ability to execute its mission today?
I'm not going to be willing to quite accept the premise
Fine.
of constraint.
Fine.
And it's easy to start off on the rattling off the right things, right? The Secretary just signed out the stand-up of the Disruptive Capabilities Office. That's building on Task Force 59 out in the CENTCOM area of responsibilities. That's using uncrewed, primarily surface, but also other ones to explore. That's already been expanded to 4th Fleet. He's launched the S&T board. He's launched the certification board. We absolutely, his third enduring priorities, enhance strategic partnerships. By very definition, refuses to accept that we are only stuck with a few people holding our hands, and if they're not with us, we can't move forward.
Right.
We are absolutely doing that.
Right.
To take your question on, though, even as
Please.
that stuff happens, we, and not just we, the Department of the Navy, but the Department of Defense at the highest levels, has started grappling with executability. Are we going to war with China? When are we going to war with China? When that date is changes a lot about what technology you're pursuing. A technology that pays off 2 years after the war ends doesn't mean much good. We are going to need scale and quantity. We need that just to achieve the deterrence. That'll be even more so if you start actually suffering attrition in combat. So now executability does introduce that tension you were talking about. At what point do we just make sure the thing we have now gets pumped out at the right volume and at a right scale, and when do we try to just sharpen it a little bit with something cooler? Those are not exclusive, and we absolutely have things running down, but mastering the tension, that That is absolutely a challenge. That is what we're staring at all times and worry all the time of whether we're getting that balance right and how to improve that balance. So we are both getting that super cool new technology, taking advantage of new things, and just having the mass
Right.
that's going to be needed.
This relates to another question I wanted to ask, which you already anticipated a little bit, but that's the sort of the tension between the speed of getting something into the fleet, to the warfighter, and some big platforms, ships and planes and submarines take a long time to build. The design goes back sometimes decades, you know. The ship that I deployed on was laid down 10 years before I joined it, and these things are supposed to be in service for decades, right? Some of them. But even things like software, again, given the pace of change, you could buy a software product that's obsolete in 2 or 3 years. How do you think about this? Is there any role for the comptroller or for other senior leadership to sort of shorten this window, the timeline from conception to execution to, as you say, to executability, which I think is a critical concept?
And we worry about both of them, right?
Yeah.
We have a bunch of mature acquisition programs. The traditional defense pathology is we're at the PowerPoint stage and we promise all things to all people, and it turns out you can't bend the metal to do both things. At which point, what do you get? Schedule slips, cost growth. Well, we fielded our first DDG-51 in the 90s. We fielded our first Virginia-class submarine in the 90s. These are not PowerPoint problems. We absolutely want to make sure we have the coolest new CWIS. We want to make sure we have the new CWIP system on those. We want the combat system that takes advantage of all of the latest software developments in every new Virginia class that comes off the line. But we're in a unique position where our major programs aren't just made up. They are long bent metal.
Yeah.
That means we need to make sure we keep getting down the learning curve even as we continue with technology insertion. Oh, software, the other side. Man, it's not clear anybody's got software figured out. Is everybody happy with what Google's doing right now? We absolutely have that challenge in the Department of Defense. We're also getting help. I'd like to introduce you to something called BA8, BA, Budget Activity 8, the 8th budget activity in the RDT&E category. Except it's just in the RDT&E category because the appropriators were nervous about their pilot. If I were to say it in just a single sentence, it's get rid of the color of money. No longer do I try to figure out, am I in a development program, a procurement program, or a sustainment and operating and maintaining program. Don't worry about that, which with software, when are you in what?
Right, right.
The appropriators have recognized that. Notice, I didn't talk about this with the ships. It should be pretty darn clear to you when you're in a development program in a ship, and when you're trying to procure them, and when you're operating and maintaining them. You cannot convince me that the defense acquisition system can't handle my multi-decade ship programs, that we can't look forward, and in fact, that's one of the best defenses against the promise everything at the PowerPoint stage.
Right.
Software? Oof. Except I've got help. The appropriators have recognized this isn't happening. The Department of the Navy has 2 programs. I love them. Each one is an $11 million program. One is the Risk Management Initiative. Did I tell you this was going to be sexy? It is incident reporting. Did somebody jump out of an airplane and it didn't work? Did somebody go diving and it didn't work? Incredibly important, right? Literally people's lives. And we need to have a record of that. And we've long known we need to keep track of that to make sure there isn't something systemic going wrong. That's one of our programs. The other one, MTC2, is designed to help ship navigation. Not ship warfighting. Literally just, I'm here, I want to go there. What's the best route to do it? It'd be nice if that was automated. It would be nice if that populated all the reports. 2 very small programs. I love it. Let's quit pretending that our problems are, we just have too many rules. Our problem is we don't figure out what we really need and deliver it. Here's the Department of the Navy proving to those people who are responsible for overseeing us that we can be trusted with these authorities. Guess what? They are, both on time, on schedule, they always like to push back on me. They don't promise to come under budget because with these flexibilities, they're going to make sure they spend every dollar they can. Right. But they get to immediately extrapolate. Do we need to expand MTC to more ships, or do we need to develop a new function? They can do it all at once. Is that the answer? No. But it is a path forward. It's something we have now. And most importantly, from that accountability, quit telling me your problem is people are giving you rules.
Right.
You absolutely have rules. You need to be responsive to the Secretary of the Navy, to the President of the United States, and to the U.S. Congress. The appropriators aren't the boogeyman. I'm the boogeyman. I want to know you're doing what the Secretary told you to do. But here is a great opportunity to earn the trust for ever more flexibility, which we then turn into ever better results.
So I had not heard of those two programs. So in those two cases, that's right. That's why we're here. Those were both Navy initiatives that you took to the appropriators. Is that right? And you said, we will do this. We're going to demonstrate to you how this works.
The appropriators gave everybody a pilot. You can each try one or two.
Okay.
And we said, we think these are the right ones. They're like, yeah, fine, $11 million. What are we going to lose?
Right.
And we're going to build the trust and show that this does work. Instead of saying, just give us blanket authority, prove that we can be trusted, and in doing so, go back and say, hey, we think we have another candidate. It would make a big difference. And do it in a gradated way that builds the trust and makes sure the American taxpayer knows the Department of the Navy can be held accountable.
Great. So speaking of appropriators and members of Congress, let's talk to me a little bit about continuing resolutions. What are the drawbacks? What are the not so apparent drawbacks to CRs for the Navy? And even in the midst of budget fights like we had just a few weeks ago, are you ever concerned that at the end of the day, the people who report to you, the people in the service, are going to be taken care of, are going to get paid? Are you ever worried about that?
I'm constantly worried about that. I can't believe we cannot reassure these people who are serving their country that the country values them and appreciates them. It boggles my mind. I do my best to try to intercede and assure them they are appreciated. The work they do is appreciated, including my green eye shade budget geeks, the people who are absolutely serving their country, even if not in uniform. And certainly to all of the service members who are actively doing that and have their future uncertain. We don't need to talk about the not surprising aspects of CRs. CRs are disruptive. It's a little bit nuts.
So yeah, talk a little bit more about that. What are the things when it comes to CRs, continuing resolution? What are the things that give you the greatest heartburn? Why is it, from your perspective, so important to get back on a cycle, whenever we were before, about authorization, appropriation, the old-fashioned way? What is it about the CRs that give you the greatest concern?
So we want to put some numbers on that. Don't count this year, but the year before, in the last 30 years, there's only been 6 times we didn't get an appropriation by the new year. Notice I'm not even trying to get it on October 15th, right? By the new year. Roughly on time, where the professor's still accepting your homework kind of thing. Only 6 out of 30 times. That's not too bad, right? The only problem is that was once in the first 20 years and 5 times in the 10 years after. Yeah, it's a new world. First, I can't sit here and blame other people. My first task to my team, to the comptrollers, those 10,000 FMers throughout the Department of the Navy is, hey, help your commander, help your boss. Why are you letting a contract in October when you're not sure you're going to have money? Right. Make sure we're on a cycle. Use the flex. We have a ton of flexibility, right? Everybody go, oh, the system's so hard and it's so rigid. There are a ton of things we can do all the time. There is a huge amount of opportunity for creativity that still stands well within the bounds of the guidance and oversight we're doing. It's my team's responsibility to live up to that challenge. Figure out when the best time to let a contract is. Think over time. Don't think, oh, my boss said this, I better deliver it in 2 weeks. Hey, boss, this would be better if you wait a month. Hey, boss, we need to hurry up because if we get it done in the next 36 hours, we'll get a better outcome. So absolutely, we have a responsibility. That said, it's still real disruption. The numbers I'm walking around with, a full year CR is, if I get stuck at sequester, it's a $15 billion hit to the Department of the Navy. If I got stuck in a full year CR, that's $26 billion of misaligned funds. A tenth of the Navy's budget is all screwed up. That's not quite true because I have not updated that number since we got this CR, which allowed me to start the second Columbia-class submarine.
Okay.
Submarines are so big, especially the nuclear deterrent submarines, are so big that each one counts as what's called a new start, a new program. One of the very few anomalies we got in the CR this time, so the worst one, the one that made me worry about the future of the country, Congress did take care of, thank you. So how that affects the $26 billion number, it helps me a little bit. Nevertheless, I'd like to solve all those problems. And again, just give my team more certainty. One of my favorite sayings, one of the best budget analysts is time. The closer you get to reality, the more you know where it is.
Right.
If, as I wait through time, there is a huge storm cloud and I have no idea what's on the other side, time can't work for me. Knowing I have a full year appropriation, knowing that's in place, then gives my team to adapt to, I don't know, world events, what's going on, how to best replenish our own stocks even as we support Ukraine. The more certainty we have, the more we can adapt and respond.
Great, thank you. Reminder for those of you in the audience, be ready for the questions. Those of you watching online, send them in. I see that some folks have already done so, so I'm looking forward to the questions from the audience. Couple other questions, switching gears again, Russell. Tell us a little bit about your time in the think tank community, especially here at Stimson. You know, how did this work help to prepare you for your current job?
Oh, man, I should have saved my thanks to Stimson when he actually teed me up. That's all right. I owe such a debt that I'm always glad to say thank you and talk about how great Stimson was, Stimson particularly. I think I got two big things out of my think tank time. My team is amazing. The other people who work in the Department of Defense are amazing. They also constantly have deadlines and tasks. That means they're stuck in the nitty-gritty at all times. Working at the think tank and doing more basic research, as you suggested your program works on, allowed me to step back and say, hey, is it unprecedented just because I don't remember, or is it actually unprecedented? That scholarly approach empowers me at every turn. And allows me to put things in context. Wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have had the time and the challenge to do that work. I certainly rely on lots of people who are doing that at all times, and so it's not that I live without it, but having personally been invested in it truly empowered me. The second one is, it turns out knowing the right answer isn't really good enough. You have to explain it to the right audience. And the think tank makes you do that. Even better than the true academics who may be doing a great job studying things over a long period of time, right? Did you say something that was responsive? It's kind of fun. I'm middle management in many ways. I report to at least 3 different bosses. Hearing somebody say, this is really important, and what they think is important is a really not that big a consideration. But then you listen to them, you're like, holy cow, that is really important for this reason over here. And so that being able to speak to audiences and understand the broader context is something think tanks both gave me and provide us writ large, right? Don't just accept whatever the Comptroller says, but have a way to put that in context and see, is BA8 really going to work? What are the other services we're doing with BA8? That context is amazingly useful.
That's great. As you know, I've been in the think tank world for 20 plus years, so I'm glad to hear.
You're just really going to drive home the age passing thing, right?
I can't help it. You know, I'll know you're a little grayer than I am, and I don't remember you being grayer than me. So maybe there's a relationship.
Can we go back and talk about not having appropriations?
Yeah, exactly. What kind of, I have, as you know, I've been in the think tank world. I also teach, and I have students come to me all the time asking about working in think tanks and working for the government. What advice do you have for the next generation in terms of the type of work they should be doing and the training they should receive if they aspire to being in public service like you are today?
Absolutely, and it's very simple, right? First, do your job well. Whatever you're doing, quit thinking, doing well will create opportunities. Excelling at whatever you're doing, even if that's a temp job, even if that's an internship, that will create opportunities as people trust you and look to give you more opportunities. Then couple that with the point I just made. be aware of all of those perspectives. You can be very, very good at what you're doing today, but if you're just worried about that standard, you won't realize that once you get up to the next level, the standard's different. Whereas if you look around, oh, what does my colleague think? What does my adversary think? What does my boss think? Having those perspectives in mind, which you can garner at every single stage. As an intern, turns out we all have bosses. We all, especially in the executive branch, right? It's just a principal agent problem all the way down. My poor OSD, if the one thing I wish I could go to the OSD folks and say is, you think it's me and MilDep that's the problem, but I know I'm trying to get these other people to do stuff, and I know they're trying to get somebody else to do stuff. Being conscious of those multiple perspectives will make you more effective. You combine that with just basic competence, and off to the races.
Great. All right, so we have time now for questions from the audience. I have a few on my iPad. I'm going to start with one, but while I'm grabbing one, Adrian or someone else will come by with the microphone. This is a public event. You will be shocked to learn, Russell, that there are some journalists watching this event online as well as with us here in the room. Nick Wilson from Inside Defense asks about the Fiscal Responsibility Act. You hinted at this a little bit. Includes a sequester provision that would reduce the Pentagon's FY24 and FY25 budgets if Congress is operating under a continuing resolution at the start of the new calendar year. How is the Navy preparing for the possibility of this provision being triggered, and what Navy programs would see funding cuts?
Well, the most important part of that question is the end, right? This is a sequester. I have no choice in how it gets administered. It's done at the program, project, and activity level. We expect that we will be able to take MilPERS off the table, the military personnel funding, so paying my uniformed members will get to come off the table. That's good. But it means all my other accounts have to burn more. So like 1.5% is what all of those over have. And the word we always used to use is meat cleaver. I don't have a choice. 1.5% off every tiny project, program, and activity level. So it's just pain. It's just pain. Hilariously, it doesn't take much preparation, right? We are consciously living in a CR right now. We're not sure where we'll finally go. We hope there is an increase for the Department of the Navy in 25. In 24. That's what the president requested. So we hope that, but by continuing at 23 levels, we are well positioned if we need to go to both. I look around the world, and I think the Department of the Navy is the answer, and I absolutely think we should get that increase. That's the preparation we're going on, and more importantly, I'm a month out from needing another appropriations bill. I'd like to get my final appropriations bill. What is the top line? Hey, the administration has already proposed supplemental funding for Ukraine. We're exploring other supplemental funding. Those things all make a difference in what we go do. All of that needs to be done.
Right. Actually, there's a question from Evan about drawdown authorities. You mentioned, I believe, that they are holding on to drawdown authorities, but with Ukraine, Taiwan, and now Israel, what's happening with Israel, how are you approaching the drawdown mechanism in existing funds?
The drawdown mechanism is a great one, right? It's an authority that Congress has vastly expanded to deal with Ukraine, and that has worked very, very well. We've had a presidential drawdown authority for a long time. It's usually a very small, something like a multi-hundred increase in the authority we've gotten. That allows us to send stuff in a very quick turnaround. We have now added the financial management community into that process. And I said that the budget community is very agile and flexible, but man, you get close up to actual conflict and you realize how much different a timeline it is than what I usually live on. Right. We absolutely are responsive to that. The next part of that is replenishment. Refilling my stocks, making sure that the U.S. has the tools and has the weapons we have. It's one, just from the budgeteer's perspective, I have no doubt the operators have taken many lessons, but that don't run out of weapons, don't run out of munitions in a modern war is a really important lesson. One we have to think about. We were very proud of increasing our munitions weapons procurement account request by more than 30%. in FY24, and that is not in the supplementals. That's backfilling, but actually trying to get ahead of the game. We are absolutely looking at the other vehicles to look out at what other challenges in the world might require us to prepare
Great.
for.
All right. Who's got the mic? Ryan Evans up here at the front of the room, and then Kelly next, and Rob. So Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you.
One brazen,
That's why he's holding it.
comment. Hello?
You did. You messed it up because you took it out of his hand. Mir, don't let him take the microphone out of your hand. You hold on to it. See. All right. While they're doing that,
I am sympathetic, however.
Yes, I'm going to ask another question from the audience while they get it straight.
Wait, I think we got it.
You got
so
it.
one
Yes.
brazen comment and then a question. Can we stop hearing bragging about the raises in the budget when they're barely keeping pace with inflation, and when there's a bipartisan group of members of Congress and the Senate that want to see more administration leadership on naval spending? So that's just, I guess, a request. But second, on your on contracting and software versus hardware, I think the distinction between O&M and everything else is going away even on the hardware side. We've seen that in space, as you know, better than most for a long time, and most recently with this new Space Force contract with SpaceX. Space Force isn't going to own those satellites. And we also see it in certain Navy contracts where there's aerial refueling happening with the Navy, the Matre is doing. And it might be classed as O&M now, but those companies are actually using that for their own research and development. So can you foresee that distinction going away in the future for hardware, even things like ships?
Well, so first I take Ryan's challenge. I absolutely believe there is a great bipartisan support for what the Department of the Navy provides the country. And I'm ready for that to be allowed. To the broader question, again, nobody is set in their ways and refusing to move. The area refueling is a great example of doing things in unconventional ways. Do I need to own all of the tankers, or can I just take advantage of them as a service? Some of that won't work, right? I don't think I'm going to rent any fast attack submarines anytime soon. But that doesn't mean everything needs to be done in the same way. I do not think we go away from fundamental, some kind of budget wickets. I need that for oversight. The Secretary needs that for oversight. Every level down does. Now, our current structure has kept getting us certain outcomes. Could we rethink that? The PPE Commission absolutely proposed something like that, a budget structure. And within, the smaller you get, the more freedom you have to move around. The higher up you get, the more everybody wants a bite before you get to do it. To use the SpaceX, Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter was one of my favorite things. Maybe not for the outcomes in Twitter, but the world's richest man. And guess what he had to do? Go ask Mother May I for money. Nobody's giving you billions of dollars to just go play with, right? Nobody gets away with that. Certainly not with American taxpayer dollars. Expect somebody to ask, what are you doing again? Expect somebody to be curious what you're doing. There are ways to change and put where the little, hey, you got a lot of freedom versus you don't have much freedom up at this level. We can change that. We're exploring how to do it. I'm excited about what the PPE Commission has already laid out and proposed on that.
Is the Navy's budget keeping pace with inflation?
What exactly is the inflation rate on all of my commodities? Or my better one to put is, how much of a price break am I getting on Navy ships given the fact that the price of steel went down by 20% in 2020? Am I about to get a big cost savings from the change in inflation? I am super excited to find out that for some reason there was a 5-year delay before I get a price break on the way the inflation indices changed over time.
Rob Levinson, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Russ. I think you and I used to talk about this once upon a time when you were here and I was at Bloomberg. But, you know, the Navy comes up with a 30-year shipbuilding plan, and usually about 6 months or so after that, the Congressional Budget Office promptly comes up with an analysis of that plan which says, can't do it, can't get there from here, the Navy is underfunding or underprojecting the funds that they need. Do you see this ever being reconciled? Is this a problem, or is this just sort of cost of doing business or the way it's going to be?
Do I dream about it being reconciled? Absolutely. Again, we're in a unique time. The first the first place you see that difference is when we're talking about something that doesn't exist yet. And so all the numbers are made up. CBO, not surprisingly, is often more conservative in getting where that is. That's not actually my biggest problem. I have a couple programs that I'm watching pretty closely as we try to figure out what it is. Columbia class is in between, right? We're headed to the second boat, but that's just the second boat. So how far along are we in that program? But I have a bunch of mature acquisition programs. Now, this gets back to my biggest problem about the inflation question is what's the difference, and you've just teed up nicely for me, is what's the difference between cost growth and inflation? I am confident at the worst time when people were most worried about inflation that there was a extra supplemental funding available for inflation, just like happened in the Reagan administration multiple times, right? We used supplementals in the Reagan administration not for contingency costs, but because, whoa, we misunderstood the economy. We're fortunate. Inflation has cooled. It's less of a pressing. But despite me walking around to industry, to my acquisition partners, we could never get a sharp break of, well, this is inflation and this is cost growth. We put on a cool new thing. We wanted something that we hadn't actually told the contractor for. So they could never separate the two. That is the problem that I and my team and everybody constantly grapples with that. If we could figure that out and clarify that, yes, I do think you would get a convergence, not least of which because we would have very clear numbers to take over to CBO and say, see, this is what we think is happening. But in the meantime, that is something I keep poking at, my team keeps poking at, and everybody wishes we could solve.
All right, another question from the audience, and then Kelly Meir has a question. I'll go to Kelly next. Doug Ware has two questions, and I'm trying to pick the right one. This is a little bit of softball for you, Russell, I think. So Doug Ware from Stars and Stripe asks, you mentioned accountability versus auditability. The Pentagon will soon release its annual audit report. Any chance it will finally get a clean rating? Question mark?
The Department of Defense?
Yes.
No.
No.
I don't think I'm even making news about that. The Department of the Navy's goal is to get an opinion in 2028. We are one of many components within the Department of Defense.
Now, the Marine Corps has been ahead on this. How about the Marine Corps? You said you're waiting on the Marine Corps, the final ruling on the Marine Corps audit, right?
Can I make myself look even more anxious? If I can, I would like to. The difference between now when I'm in the Pentagon versus last time I was in the Pentagon was the seriousness about getting to auditability. Okay. GAO would tell you that's because from 2014 we were required to give annual updates. I don't know. I think there's a lot of leadership. Again, I got to watch the Commandant say the Marines will be auditable, and surprise, surprise, they're the ones farthest along.
Right.
Now, let's be careful. They're the smallest service.
Right.
There's a bunch of things that are sitting over on the rest of the Department of the Navy's books. Nevertheless, it's a huge accomplishment. We are seeing that the system, the financial management system the Marines are using is called DAI, Defense Agency Initiative. It's been a very successful system that many of the defense agencies have been using. The Marines are just way, way bigger, and that has created a great deal of difficulty, a great deal of responding. The team has been amazing. It's my favorite meeting to attend because things actually get done. Right. People raise things and a decision is made, and the next time you come back and it's over. That's not how a lot of Pentagon meetings go. It's my favorite one. There is progress being made. A huge amount of that comes down from the leadership. And the DAI example, Kathy Miller, the Deputy Comptroller, and as I said, the Deputy Secretary has made this a priority from the get-go, and that makes a difference.
Great, thank you. Kelly Grieco, my colleague Kelly Grieco has a question.
Hi, thank you. Great talk and discussion. My question is about something that you said earlier. You were talking about the need for scale and quantity, particularly cheaper mass, which is something that I also agree with. But what I'm wondering is, in thinking about the problem of getting there to that mix with more mass, is the barrier, in your view, more within the DoD in terms of the cultural mental shift of prioritizing cheaper, larger numbers of cheaper systems? Or is the problem really with industry because the industry is set up on a business model that really favors smaller numbers of exquisite, expensive systems, and that somehow that business model needs to change to support DoD's goals?
I'm the budgeteer, so I'm a little bit not the right one to ask. I'm not sure I said cheaper or mass. First of all, it's $250 billion to the Department of the Navy, right? Is cheap what I'm going for here? I would just like to not have cost growth that throws the rest of my budget out of whack. Is really would be a good enough start. And mass is an interesting thing, right? Because mass becomes a question, especially when you start talking about the sea services where they have a maneuverability that you just don't get on the land, right? So mass takes on its own meaning. You'll have to get the SWO to tell you all about how you concentrate fires and salvos and pulses and all of the great fleet tactic terms.
It's a dim fading memory in my brain, yes.
We have a habitual relationship with a large number of suppliers. There's something good about that. I made my steel joke already. I am sometimes a little bit sad that I don't seem to get to leverage the private sector as much. I don't think the Navy would have said, hey, steel went down, we want to pay less for these ships. I think that was just profit. Waiting for private executives. I'm a public servant. I am not allowed to make money off the job. I can't even take a cup of coffee from Stimson. I intentionally am using private ship. We have public shipyards. They don't get to take cups of coffee from Stimson. They are right to worry about, have I gotten appropriation? I have another category, private shipyards. It's billions of dollars. You don't want to take a little bit more of that? That wouldn't make a difference in your company and your personal life? The Navy's not arguing to get rid of. We're not trying to lean out profit. We want the private shipyards. We have been involved with the private shipyards. And then to get on, we want to partner with all the other people who are using different business models. So it doesn't even have to be a this or the other answer. It can be all of it. I am a little surprised that there isn't more taking advantage of the fact that we're going to spend a ton of money, right? Nobody's even trying to do cheap. We're trying to get cost effective is the word I want, not cheap. We're just arguing about how much we should be raising the Department of Navy budget, not how do we deal with it. Now, although I will point out that we're living under caps and the Navy is absolutely responsible for making the most of the money it has. In the past, I've introduced the Running Fix Initiative, the Secretary's effort to make sure we are spending money in the best way we possibly can, and I'd be glad to look forward to talking about that more and more as we explore things.
All right. Well, I gave you a softball, so I'm going to give you a hardball from Tony Capaccio at Bloomberg News. Tony asks, on the Littoral Combat Ship, can you explain to the public why the Navy is simultaneously retiring LCS well short of their service lives, like the USS Sioux City, while commissioning new ones like the USS Marinette at the same time? The Navy spent billions on this program. Should the public view it as a major failure?
We certainly don't view it as a major failure. I'm sure everybody wishes there were a few decisions they could get back, but that gets back to the executability conversation we were having.
Yeah.
The later ships, the farther on I am down the line, the more opportunity I have to have corrected mistakes or concerns that we had earlier. Is it better to invest in them? But that then gets into a capacity capability trade, and that gets into our scale trade, and that. So it's an incredibly complex conversation that eats up a lot of time and energy trying to get at what the right answer is.
Okay.
Is there a right answer here? We're going to get an answer, and then we're going to see how the world unfolds to see if we guessed right.
Right. Actually, I'll ask a follow-up on that. On lessons learned, can you apply some of the lessons learned from the LCS program to the new frigate program?
Absolutely. In fact, I think we have already applied a huge amount of those lessons.
Okay.
Now, some of that is being more conservative all the way through, and we're going to get a much more traditional-looking warship than we did with the LCS.
Right.
So, once again, there's a contingent who looks at us and is yelling at us, oh my goodness, you're just going back to traditional warships. Don't you know the world has fundamentally changed? And then we can get yelled at from the other side of, why on earth would you try this crazy new thing that clearly was a major failure, or we want to bill it as a major failure.
Right.
So that is the tension. And as we get farther along, that executability question, not cooler, newer, faster, not tried and true, but finding the right balance is the question. World events continue to sharpen the importance of getting it right.
Right. All right, so we're almost out of time. I think I have time for 2 more questions if your answers are quick. You've been pretty good.
Have I been the problem so far?
No, you've been pretty good about this, so I'm impressed. Jordan Aronowitz asks, regarding prime contractors and their impact on audit results, what is the Navy's path forward to ensure prime contractors can support the Navy's auditability? Are contract renegotiations on the table?
Contract renegotiations are also are absolutely on the table. I want to think about exploring more things. You are holding a piece of government furnished equipment and you can't produce it? Can I just bill you right then and there? Hey, you can't show it to me? Pay me back.
Right.
Contract negotiations are absolutely underway. That takes a long time. But there is a standard blurb in the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, that says, hey, you've got to keep hold of your government furnished. Is that enough for me to sue a contractor? Can I just sue them right there on that? If the contract doesn't have an exemption, do I have standing? You'll notice I have to use words like explore. It's not quite a, by the way, in court, right. But
yes.
Absolutely. And the biggest punchline is, guess what all my prime contractors are? Audited organizations.
Right.
Their IPAs know where their stuff, they convince them, why won't they just tell me, the government, in most cases, their #1 customer? I think this is absolutely just a moment of time, absolutely just raising it up to the right level. So instead of somebody just trying to give me a stiff arm and be a jerk, somebody thinks about this in a broader way of we'd all be better off. We are absolutely in a partnership. The Secretary of the Navy, this is the second time I've had to invoke his enhanced strategic partnerships. Our partnership with industry is absolutely a strategic partnership. I absolutely want that to be a productive one. I would hope that is one when my audit team shows up, they're like, absolutely, let us help you with that.
Okay, so last question, which is somewhat related to what you just said. James from FM&C asks, we have several ships and submarines under construction and in varying states of completion. Most are behind schedule for delivery. How do you plan to hold the shipyards accountable and actually deliver hulls to the fleet?
James, FM&C, Financial Management and Comptroller. So we just shorthanded what my organization is. So James, I hate to point this out, James, the way I'm going to do it is make sure you're paying attention and bring it to my attention when somebody's screwing up. Right. But we absolutely are very aware, look, this can't be just adversarial, right? If it needs to be adversarial, it will be. But our partnership with industry is a strategic partnership. It is absolutely a give and take. For many years, we were told by industry, hey, we need clear headlights. Well, hey, it's been 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 for a long time. 2 submarines, 2 destroyers. What more headlights do you need? We just signed a multi-year contract on the destroyers. That better be headlights. On munitions, we are going big on saying we need more munitions. We're trying to let multi-year contracts and not even trying as hard to get the cost savings, which of course makes me a little nervous as a budgeteer. Munitions, fine. On the other ones, I want more out of that. We believe we have delivered those clear headlights. We're doing our best. The debate about how much do we need to take care of the Department of the Navy, it's a legitimate debate, but it doesn't sound like you should be slacking off and deciding, oh, now is not the time to bet on the U.S. Navy buying steel.
Got it.
So the Navy won't be trying to break any multi-years from destroyers and submarines in the future.
Question from the audience, from Eric Labs.
What is my top line for the next 5 years?
He answered a question with a question. Well played, Russell Rumbaugh. All right.
But we have been, we have been very clear. My favorite line is one of my bosses, the Undersecretary of Defense for Comptroller, at his press conference rolling out the 24 budget said, we wish we could buy 3 submarines and we wish we could buy 3 destroyers. That sounds like an opportunity. The more, basically every dollar that we save in subs will go back into the undersea. This is why the partnership is so important, why we all need to be working together, why we, the Department of the Navy, are making direct investments into the private shipyards, into taking care of both our people and the shipyards. That strategic partnership is incredibly important, and I can't wait to see the outcome as we push through these times.
Great, thank you. On behalf of the Stimson Center, welcome, as I said before, and as Rachel said, welcome back. Russell, you are always welcome here at Stimson. This is a great discussion. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for attending, those of you in person as well as those of you watching online. Thank you very much for the questions. And one last time, thank you. Shout out to our comms team and to Evan Cooper for the work on this event. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.